Time flies when you're looking at your AI generated ad, I suppose could be said. Today we're going to be testing the Manus AI agent, which is something that I surprisingly have never done on the channel. This is something that has been around for quite a while, and truthfully, in looking at this app and the current state of Manus as an agent, you can see a lot of inspiration has been taken from this. Being one of the original popular agents, in my opinion, that did come out, it definitely has influenced a lot of design decisions for other agents. Now, there are a few things that I specifically am excited to showcase with Manus today, more relating to things we specifically like to do on the channel. With that said, though, there really are a lot of different things that Manus is capable of doing, and we'll touch upon some of them, but this is going to be mainly focused on a couple of use cases that I find very, very interesting and perhaps underexplored or underutilized in terms of an AI agent's ability to actually perform these tasks. So before we get into it, please do feel free to subscribe, and thank you to Manus AI for sponsoring today's video and allowing me to continue putting out videos at a rapid pace on the channel. So with that, we're going to get started, and a couple of things I want to specifically mention first and foremost. I am actually using this as a native Windows application. I find that oftentimes Windows seems to be left out of the more recent releases in a lot of agentic platforms, so it's nice to see something that does properly support Windows as well. A lot of things are just Mac specific. This does also have a Mac OS compatible app, so if you do use a Mac, you can download and run this in the same manner. However, for Windows folks, I do find it's nice to have an option to perform some agentic tasks as well. So this is just running on a Windows laptop, as we'll see in a little bit. Now, in lieu of just talking a bunch about Manus before we get into the meat of the video, so to speak, I do really want to just jump in because there's something very interesting that this has the capability to do, and it does tie in with my mention of how Windows is sometimes not properly supported by a lot of agentic tools. Fortunately, this is not the case. So we're going to begin just by clicking on the My Computer button right here, and we're going to see that we have one option, which is to use a cloud computer, which we can do, and that would just maintain existence in the cloud. It's something that can learn and grow with you and have memory of your interactions, things of the sort. However, the alternative is to add a local folder, which is what we're going to opt to do right now. Now, I have created an empty folder, just aptly named Manus Agent. I'm very creative, I do know, and we're going to allow it to work from within this folder, keeping in mind again that this is using the Manus AI desktop application on Windows, and this is a Windows computer. So I'm going to instruct this to essentially build us an application to visually monitor the GPU utilization of the system. This is a mobile 5090 laptop, something that is decently capable of actually running some performant LLMs, and in addition to that, I'm also going to tell it that the specific purpose of this tool that this is going to create as a Windows application, not a web app, not something like that, a genuine Windows application, which is kind of cool. So to begin, I'm giving this a prompt for what we had spoken about, where we're going to have it create a visual monitoring tool for the GPU on the system tailored towards running local AI workloads. My inspiration for this idea is pretty heavily influenced by the Windows Vista sidebar, which I do recall had some interesting sort of tachometer or some other gauge that showed system utilization. I kind of like that. Maybe it's just nostalgic, if nothing more, but this is a relatively intricate prompt right here where it needs to create this lightweight Windows application. We have a bunch of different things that it must include, as well as some specifically defined UI goals, even mentioning that this is inspired by the Vista gadget tachometer aesthetic, but modernized, some color coordination in terms of how heavy load the GPU is under, and a few things like a static deliverable list and things of that sort. Now, I am going to swap this. We do have multiple selectable options right here from Manus 1.6 Lite, Manus 1.6, and then Manus 1.6 Max. Because this could perhaps be somewhat of a complicated task, I am going to opt to use Max for this, and the next thing we're going to do is just initiate this process, and this will actually create this Windows application, which we'll then be able to take a look at, and if we so desire, further optimize for a specific use case. So let's get started. Now, something else that is kind of cool to bring up right now is we see a little QR code has popped up on screen, and something that Manus offers the ability to do is just control this remotely from a phone. So say I wanted to go out right now, I could just download this app and monitor it on my phone as well as get notified when it's done. And because I do think it would be a better demonstration of the capabilities to do so, I am going to grab a phone and we'll see what happens when we get in the remote app as well. All right, this may be somewhat cumbersome to film, but I have pulled out my phone right here, and I'm just going to scan this QR code. All right, it gives me a web page to open, as one would expect, and then it just brings us to the screen where we can install the Manus AI app. So that is what I'm going to do right now. And then once it's installed, we are going to just log in and be able to monitor this remotely from the phone. Now, in the meantime, I'd also like to take a look and see what specific info this is giving us about the process that it is undergoing. We can see here that we have a bunch of specific things that are happening, and if we click on any one of them, it expands into a lot of further and more intricate detail right here, such as designing the architecture, which is where it starts, implementing the NVML wrapper and GPU monitoring service. All right, that is also good to see because this will give us the source data for our aesthetically pleasing UI to actually draw from. All right, cool. I like this right here because it's showing us a little bit of insight, even if it's not visual yet, of what this aesthetic is going to look like. So create the circular gauge custom control, create the arc drawing helper for the circular gauge, and it just gives us some TLDR about what it's doing as well. We also have this list right here, which we can click on, and this is just a more commonly seen to-do list where it will check off the specific part that it is working in, and I'll leave that open here as well as I continue setting up. I just need to enter my password on the phone so that we can monitor this remotely. And now with the app set up properly and installed on the phone, we basically can see that we're getting a mirror of the exact same thing that is actually happening on our local system, which is cool to see. So this is something you can just makes it portable. It makes it able to be controlled from not specifically sitting in front of the machine, and it will also notify you when it has finished. So if you want to just leave it running for a longer, more drawn out task and get like a text or a notification or something, you can do so. All right, so we see right here we just got a generated image. Also on the phone, it is actually more visible because it just opens it without the to-do list. It gives us a UI dashboard mockup. Okay, this is actually quite cool. I should probably just look at it on the computer screen. I do apologize, but I want to showcase the phone remote access feature or processing as well. All right, let's take a peek at this. Having generated UI mockup of the dark mode dashboard with gauges, metrics, and timeline graphs, I'm now focused on refining the architecture for modularity. And here we have our background image or our mockup for the UI. This is definitely in line with what I had wanted to see, and just kind of like a dashboard with some gauge aesthetic and things of the sort. So now its task is to basically mate this front end with the back end of actually being able to pull all of these metrics from the card on this system, which is going to be quite a task, I would say, especially because this is not a web app or like a web dashboard. This is something that is going to need to natively run on this Windows system, and something that's not as commonly seen as just like a vibe-coded web app or something. So this is a more intricate level of complexity, I would say. We've now been met with our completed application. It's just giving us some build instructions and the files it created as well. Now, I think that one of the follow-up things I would like to send it is essentially I want you to also follow these build instructions for me. Basically get this to the point where it opens up on the system and is running without me really having to do much. So we'll initiate it with that task of now having to go ahead and build this itself and then just get it running on the system so we'll be able to see it without having to really do any of the manual steps. And at the same time, we can see what's happening on our phone as well. So if we want to remotely monitor this, we can, even to the point where it shows the specific command that is being executed here as well. And here's probably a good demonstration of just being able to monitor this remotely is I'm going to click allow any command in this task, and I've just done that from the mobile phone here, so we don't even need to be in front of the computer, which is quite useful. All right, so we have basically the main prerequisite now set up and installed, which is the .NET 8 SDK on the system, something that, if you recall, was listed here as a build instruction, so fortunately it just did that itself. and now it's going to perform the rest of the steps to build the project, and then we'll see it running on the system. So we've encountered a bit of a hiccup where it says the process is running. It even lists the process ID. Unfortunately, we don't visually see this dashboard on screen, so I'm using this as an opportunity to test some of its additional troubleshooting capabilities. Basically, I've asked it, can you take images and look at them to remedy this issue yourself, especially being a native Windows app that this is running just as the Manus agent program here. Being able to actually use the computer this way, or even take screenshots of it to help diagnose multimodally, can be very, very helpful in scenarios like this. All right, so we have received our issue right here, which is that the resource for multiply cannot be found. It gives us the reason as well. The circular gauge template references something that is not accessible, so it is going to fix that and then relaunch the app. So it's fixed the issue that was stopping the circular gauge from appearing, and it's now going to test the app once more to see if the window does appear. All right, after a lot of intricate troubleshooting, we see I've identified the issues. It's going to fix or implement the fixes and then rebuild the app. This is really, I mean, it's almost probably unfair to have jumped into a task like this for the first test, but I really wanted to showcase like, hey, this can run natively on a Windows system and actually build a native Windows application that has some depth and complexity to it. So I felt this was necessary for a proper test. Sick. Now that is what I'm talking about. That was really quite impressive. That was some very intricate troubleshooting. I will very likely have time-lapsed at least some of it right here. And we also get on our phone still. It's going to take a screenshot to verify the application's working, so we're pretty likely going to see a screenshot pop up on the phone here of what we get. Now this is absolutely correct. This is a GeForce 5090 laptop GPU, so it has 24 gigs of video RAM. Yep, okay, we can see actually, I mean, on the phone app, it's hard to see right now because I don't want to just hold it up to the camera, but we do have the temperature of the GPU, and we have a little inference monitor right here. This is a native Windows app that this just slapped together, troubleshooted, and it was somewhat difficult in some of the issues that were happening right here. We have the circular graph, somewhat inspired by the Windows Vista monitor. We have timeline here, as was also denoted in the prompt. We have an inference session, and it's basically just telling us if inference is happening, our average tensor core utilization, and things like that are like complicated. And we have 5-minute and 10-minute charts for the timeline. Now this hasn't been running for that long, so keep that in mind. And then we have AI active and things. It may look simple if you just were to see the screen like this, like, oh, okay, that's pretty easy. This was not necessarily a trivial task to hand this thing, especially for a first test. And to be completely honest, in a sponsored video that like I didn't know if it was not a guarantee that this would have properly popped this out. So I kind of put some faith into the capabilities, and I'm glad we did, because now we have something that is sick. So this is going to bring me to, I think, an additional showcase of some of the capabilities here that I'm interested in highlighting, something that I think is kind of underutilized in terms of a capability AI has that I don't see a lot of folks taking advantage of, and that is as follows. So let me first open the sidebar right here. We're going to go to the plugin sections, and if we scroll down a bit, we're going to see there is also a skills section. Now, something very interesting is the one we see right here, HTML video production. Now this, on first glance, seems a little confusing, but it's actually quite simple. This will actually create videos just using HTML coding and language, for lack of a better term. This can basically create cool marketing assets for us autonomously, designed to depict a specific thing. Now, because we did just make a little Windows application, I think it may be pretty cool to actually have some form of marketing video created for our little GPU monitor using this skill. So in lieu of actually having to manually gather these assets, tie these things together, this skill will allow the Manus agent to essentially autonomously create a marketing video for our new piece of software. And this is something AI is actually capable of doing programmatically, and I think it is still rather underutilized in terms of the way folks at least talk publicly about using AI. So I'm going to select try it out right here. I just added the HTML video production skill for Manus. Can you demo it with some great examples? Now, in lieu of doing that, we're basically going to actually just copy that right there. We're going to go back into the sidebar and we're going to go into the task we have here in the history. Now, I'm going to need to ensure that the skill is also added in right here. And because we did just enable that as a skill, it is right there. And that is the invocation of the skill, what we see right here. So I've now invoked this skill, and it's going to, as we see right there in the prompt, basically this is going to now create a marketing asset for our new piece of software that we did just create. I've asked it to be portrait mode because I said this is going to target mobile phone ad campaigns. And something cool about Manus is it has some really interesting integration with like meta ads and things like this. So if you are someone who actually has to handle marketing campaigns through meta ads, this could be extremely useful because you could have a pipeline that basically will create these assets for you and then also help you run those campaigns using said assets. So this specifically right here is, again, and I'm going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here because I'm going to mention it a lot, but I really do believe AI's ability to programmatically generate video assets is something that has not necessarily been as talked about as I would have expected it to be. It's working on just generating individual assets for this ad video now, and it's actually generating music. Okay, as we see, it just finished generating the music. I generated a 15-second dark futuristic background track with energetic synths and bass, matching the sleek tech noir mood for the marketing video. Next, I'll focus on assembling the assets. All right, our marketing video is ready. Here's what was produced. So it's just giving us a table of deliverables. Okay, it's in our Manus agent folder as an MP4 file. Oh, okay, good. It's here as well. I'm very excited to see this. Now, because there's audio, what I'm likely going to do is I want to watch this because I haven't seen it, but I will also probably just play it in the actual, like I'll play the MP4 file because the speakers on this computer leave a lot to be desired. So, all right, let's minimize that. All right, here we go. Okay, good. See, we have actual screenshots of this specific thing. Good, good. It has like the load in things. It talks about the beat. We have the NV inference monitor download now. Simple. That was that 14 seconds? Okay. Time flies when you're looking at your AI generated ad, I suppose could be said. Live GPU metrics at a glance. Session analytics, AI inference detection. That would actually have taken reasonable amount of effort to make, at least in my opinion. I'm not very good at building things like that, so I may be off base in terms of that. But the fact that we just had this create this actual ad for the piece of software that we just had to create prior to that, I think is absolutely awesome. So that is something that just excites me. And again, I think this is something that is not necessarily fully explored in terms of AI's capability to programmatically just do things like this. So for the final ask here, just to make things complete, I'm asking for a nice custom icon for the GPU monitoring app. So when it's open, the taskbar doesn't show it as a generic Windows tray app. What I mean by that is if we hover over it right here, we see that this is just a generic app being showcased to us. It doesn't have its own specific icon, which is something I would like to have just in terms of completeness, if nothing more. So that is going to be our final ask here in terms of this full app creation. The app has just relaunched, and if we scroll down and hover over the taskbar, we now have our custom app icon that was properly created, and now it does not look like a bare bones like default Windows program running here. So that's pretty cool. Okay, it's taking a screenshot to verify the icon is showing in the taskbar, which we don't necessarily need it to do, but it's good to see as well, just for some QA and ensuring that it could autonomously fix an issue if it noticed that for some reason it wasn't working. So it made the icon for us, it put it into the app, it closed the app, and then relaunched it to verify that the icon is actually there. And now we see a completion message and a table that just tells us a bit about that. So that is really cool. And really, there's not going to be so much of a very nice. Good. So we can get a better look at specifically what is there. There's not going to be so much of a traditional results overview to this video because I really wanted to heavily focus on and emphasize actually doing something productive with this. Genuinely, we just built a native Windows application to monitor the GPU on the system, which is not a trivial task. Following that, we then had it make a marketing video for it all programmatically, which is, again, not a trivial task. And then finally, we had it slap on a nice little icon that it did create, which is more of a trivial task than the other two things that preceded it. However, still, this is really quite powerful, and Windows as an operating system, I find, has not been given as much love for a lot of the agentic tools, and being able to use a Manus AI, an agentic app like this that works very smoothly natively on Windows as well as Mac, I just happen to use Windows for this video, is very nice, as a lot of folks still do use Windows and will want to be, I mean, this is like, it's vibe coding a Windows app, I guess. That would be a good hook for the title. So with that, really, that is going to conclude what is probably not a super long video, but something I hope that really properly demonstrates some of the sheer capability and power of Manus AI's agent. This is really quite cool, I do have to say, in my not so humble opinion. And we're left with this little NV inference monitor right here, which just shows us specific specs about our graphics card, something that is far more aesthetically pleasing and kind of an ode to the Windows Vista performance monitor that used to sit like up in the top right of the screen. So that's going to conclude today's video. Again, thank you to Manus AI for allowing me to show this on camera and flex some of my creative ideas that I come up with, such as this. But all right, so if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.